My dad kicked me out when he remarried, seeing me as a reminder of his past mistakes. I finally opened up about the way my parents had treated me for years, and now my dad is facing the consequences. A little over a year ago, my mom eloped with her high school affair partner. After 2 years of sneaking around, she decided to make a run for it. At first, they almost got married in secret, but she had second thoughts and wanted to do things the right way. So, she returned after 2 weeks with divorce papers, and my parents split officially. Surprisingly, she didn't want custody of me, although they couldn't stand each other. They disliked me even more. After the divorce, my mom cut all ties, moving to Europe with her new partner. While it seemed like a fresh start for her, it left me with no choice but to stay with my dad. Things got worse after she left. He had always resented me, but now he outright loathed me. I was a living reminder of his failed marriage and her betrayal. My parents were obsessed with their image, so even though they never really cared for me, they kept me around to maintain appearances. They made sure I was always well-dressed and presented, but behind closed doors, I was neglected and mistreated. I never dared to speak up, fearing their wrath if anyone found out what was happening at home. Things took a turn when my dad remarried. He had been dating his secretary ever since my mom filed for divorce, keeping the relationship under wraps until everything was finalized. About 3 months ago, they announced their engagement, and 2 weeks ago, they got married. I attended the ceremonies, but it was only because I had to. My dad made it clear I was just there to play the role of a happy daughter. Once the wedding was over, they told me I had to move out. They wanted a fresh start, and I didn't fit into their plans. I'm 17, almost 18, and their decision left me in a tough spot. College wouldn't start for a few months, and I had nowhere to go. I had no savings because my parents never allowed me to work, fearing it would raise questions about our family situation. When I pleaded with my dad and stepmom for help, they coldly told me it was my problem and gave me a week to leave. I broke down in tears, but they ignored me. Desperate, I packed a few things and went to my grandparents' house. I had never told anyone about the way I was treated at home, scared of the consequences if my parents found out. But this time, I finally opened up. My dad's parents were shocked and outraged when they heard my story. They immediately took me in and assured me I wouldn't have to worry about anything. They even went to my dad's house to retrieve all my belongings. But things didn't end there. My grandfather, who runs the family business, was furious about what I'd been through. He decided to fire my dad from the company. My dad had been set to take over the business once my grandpa retired, but now that's off the table. Without his job, he's also losing access to the company house and car. My dad is threatening to sue, but my grandpa isn't backing down. He has solid grounds for the termination, citing my dad's incompetence. Of course, the real reason was how he treated me, and my grandpa made it clear he would rather see the business go to someone else than leave it to my dad after hearing the truth. Since then, my grandparents have been incredibly supportive and kind. For the first time, I finally feel like I have a family that cares about me. When I arrived at my grandparents' house and told them everything, they were shocked. They assured me that if I had reached out sooner, they would have taken me away from my parents immediately and given me a safe place to live. I wish I had known that earlier, but I was always too afraid of how my parents would react. My grandparents understood my fear, and now, together, we're working to undo the damage my parents caused. For the first time in my life, I feel supported. My grandparents have taken over all my expenses, easing my worries about how I'd pay for college. It's a huge relief not to have to stress about finances or constantly worry about my father's next move. I had hoped that after I left my father's house, the legal battles between him and my grandpa could be resolved without dragging me into it. However, my dad hasn't stopped texting me for the past 2 days, clearly struggling to cope with the fallout of my decision to finally speak up. He seems intent on making me feel guilty, unable to accept that he's now facing the consequences of his actions. Though my mom played a role in my upbringing, she's not directly involved right now. My dad is the one paying the price. It was his choice to kick me out to start fresh with his new wife. Despite living in a house provided by the company out of my grandfather's generosity, he never truly earned the position or the benefits he received. It was all because of my grandfather. Now, my father has been messaging me from multiple accounts, accusing me of being vindictive and cruel. He claims I was petty for speaking to my grandpa about my treatment. He downplayed the neglect I endured, saying lots of kids don't get the affection they need but don't make a big deal out of it like I am. He dismissed my grandpa's accusations of neglect. calling me spoiled for expecting lifelong support. The truth is, I was neglected, maybe not in the most obvious way since I was provided with food and clothing, but emotionally, I was abandoned. I can't recall a single moment where my parents genuinely spent time with me or took me on family outings. Even during vacations, we'd stay in separate rooms, only coming together for staged photos before retreating back into our strained, disconnected lives. So yes, I was neglected, and it was real. Initially, I ignored his messages, but then he blamed me for everything he's losing. He's being evicted from the company house, and my grandmother is buying the property to transfer it to my name. He also mentioned losing his inheritance to me, making me feel conflicted about accepting everything he's forfeiting. If I take the house and inheritance, it will be at his expense, and he's trying to make me feel guilty about it. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since I left my dad's house, and he's now in the process of being evicted. Some people have asked why he's losing the house. My grandfather's finance company provides housing as part of the compensation package for higher-level employees, including my dad. Housing costs in our area are steep, so this benefit was a significant perk. But now, my grandmother is purchasing the house from the company and transferring ownership to me. My dad has been served an eviction notice and has 4 weeks to vacate, much more time than the single week he gave me. Thanks to the supportive comments I've received, I've stopped blaming myself for his situation. I believe he deserves what's happening, and I've started blocking all his attempts to contact me. At first, I didn't block him because I thought he'd just create new accounts to harass me, but now I've decided not to let it bother me anymore. Living with my grandparents has been a refreshing change. They share some of my father's traits, like being punctual and particular about table manners, but unlike him, they are genuinely kind people. It feels like I'm finally experiencing what it's like to live in a caring family. Most importantly, they actually talk to me, something my parents never did. It's been a nice change, and though I know I'll be leaving for college soon, I'm grateful for this time with them. I also want to address some comments from my original post. I noticed some people called me a doormat or spineless for not standing up for myself sooner. I want to remind everyone that I'm only 17, just a few months shy of turning 18. For years, my parents conditioned me to stay silent, drilling into me the idea that if I ever spoke up about the emotional neglect I faced, they'd make me pay for it. They used intimidation to keep me quiet, and as a child, I had no way of fighting back. It wasn't about being spineless, I was just a kid who was scared. It was their job to protect me, not to make me fear speaking out. To those who questioned my courage, I'd like to say it shouldn't have been my responsibility to be brave. It was my parents' duty to make me feel safe and cared for. Telling my grandparents about what I went through was incredibly difficult. When I was 11, I once had an outburst at a family gathering because I felt ignored. My parents immediately took me home, grounded me for a month, and completely ignored me during the entire winter break. That experience taught me to never speak out about what was happening at home. After that, I was too terrified to say anything. So, calling me spineless isn't fair. Even if I took a stand later than some might think I should have, at least I finally did it. I'm proud of myself for speaking up. Old habits die hard, and it's going to take time and effort to undo all the damage my parents have done. But I'm determined to heal and move forward. I guess that's why I initially questioned whether it would be right to accept everything that was supposed to go to my dad, but would now be given to me. However, after everything that's happened, I know I deserve this. I'm no longer going to shy away from sharing my story or letting others dictate how I should feel about it. Update 2. Hey everyone, it's been a pretty eventful week since my last post. My dad has officially started the wrongful termination lawsuit against my grandpa. As expected, none of my grandparents are worried about it. In fact, they seem unfazed by the whole situation. I was a bit concerned at first, as I didn't want them to face any kind of loss, whether financially or in terms of their reputation, because of my father's actions, but they reassured me that they're well equipped to handle this. They've got a team of lawyers who specialize in situations like this, and they're confident they can squash the lawsuit within days, if not weeks. That gave me some peace of mind. Since I started blocking all the accounts my dad was using to harass me, he stopped trying to get in touch. I guess he finally realized it wouldn't work. I also showed my grandparents all the messages he sent, and they passed them along to their legal team as evidence. I'm not sure exactly what it proves, but I did as they asked because I want to support them in any way I can. I still feel a little guilty though. After all, this entire mess started because of me. Because of the lawsuit. My grandparents' company had to pause the process of selling the house my dad was living in since it's currently tied up in a property dispute. If nothing else, my dad has managed to delay his eviction, but if luck's on my side, he won't be able to stretch it out much longer. I do feel that luck is on my side though. My grandparents have been encouraging me to speak up about my experience living with my parents, and now pretty much the whole family knows what I went through. As a result, they've all cut ties with my father. They feel this is the right thing to do because, for so long, my dad pressured me to stay silent and uphold his image of being a well-raised, sophisticated man, but that couldn't have been further from the truth. Losing his reputation among family members is going to be the biggest blow to him. And with word spreading about his legal battle with my grandpa, he might even lose friends who would likely distance themselves from him. Update 3. Hey everyone, it's been a couple of days since the court proceedings began, and things are definitely not looking good for my father. Today, he showed up at my grandparents' house without any lawyers, hoping to speak with them in person. I wasn't surprised, and neither was my grandfather, because my dad had no valid reason to make demands. I was the one to open the door for him. But he didn't acknowledge me at all. He waited until my grandparents entered the room before he began speaking. He told them he was ready to settle out of court if they were open to it, but my grandpa shut him down immediately. He made it clear that my dad wasn't in a position to make any demands, especially since it was my dad who started this fight. My grandpa made it clear he wasn't willing to settle, despite my dad's insistence that he only acted in the heat of the moment. As things got heated, my dad pointed at me and said that if anyone needed to be blamed, it should be me. I found that bizarre because none of this was my fault. I didn't say anything. I just walked away and went back to my room. My grandparents later told me that I'd done the right thing by not engaging with him, as it would have only escalated the situation. Before leaving, my dad called me disrespectful and a brat. He claimed that my grandparents would fail me just like they had failed him, which was absurd considering the only reason he had a job, a house, and any semblance of a secure future was because of my grandparents. After several failed business ventures funded by my grandfather, my dad started working for the company 8 years ago, but he never met my grandfather's expectations. Now, everything that's happening has been a long time coming. I might have been the catalyst, but my dad still refuses to accept his own responsibility in all of this. He'll have to continue fighting it out in court since his attempt at a settlement was shot down because of his own behavior. Update 4. Hey everyone, it's been a couple of months, and I'm starting college next week. Time has flown by, and I can't believe how much has happened in such a short time. Here's a quick update on everything that's gone down. First off, my grandfather won the case. My dad ended up with practically nothing. I think he gave up after his secretary-turned-wife filed for divorce, something we all saw coming, given her history as a gold digger. Regardless, my dad chose to walk away from it all. We haven't heard from him since, which, honestly, is probably for the best. My grandpa did hear from some relatives that he's moved into an apartment in the suburbs. I guess he's trying to start fresh, and I genuinely wish him the best in that regard. Living with my grandparents has been great, but now it's time for me to move on to college. I'm excited to start this new chapter of my life. For the first time, I'll be living independently, with only the usual college rules to follow. It's still going to be better than living under my parents' roof, and I'm hopeful that this new phase will be a positive experience. Here's to new beginnings.